Our last episode covered the plague of Cyprian, the outbreak of a devastating disease that swept through numerous cities of the Roman Empire in an age when so much was already going wrong. You're probably tired of hearing about crisis at this point, and we are getting close to the rise of an emperor the Senate would name Restitutor Orbis, or the Savior of the world. But before we meet that man, you need to understand the darkest depths of the calamity that made Romans of all classes long for such a figure. On this episode, we will see perhaps the most humiliating defeat a Roman emperor faced and the loss of unity in the Roman Empire. Two different breakaway states, one in the west and one in the east, divide the Roman Empire up for the first time. We are going to unravel the chaos of the 250s through 270 AD on this episode of the Pax Romana podcast. Episode 76, The Breakup of the Roman Empire. I just wanted to put in a short plug. My YouTube channel is up and running. I finished a 6-part series on the origins of ancient Rome. We look at the city of Rome and Italy prior to the Roman Republic, so kind of the deepest history of the city of Rome. That channel also features my review of Gladiator 2, which is quite thorough. So check out my YouTube channel if you haven't. Just search YouTube for my name, Colin Elliott, or you can use my YouTube handle, ProfCPE, PROFCPE, and find me that way, youtube.com/@ProfCPE. And you can check out my videos. For the next few weeks, I'll be uploading excerpts from lectures that I delivered at Indiana University on the Roman Republic, and then we'll see where we go from there. Anyway, check out my YouTube channel. Let's get to today's episode of the Pax Romana podcast. At the beginning of the AD 50s, Trajan Decius ruled in Rome, a seasoned senator thrust onto the throne after a messy civil war. And as we saw last time, before he was really able to settle in, a plague, unlike any seen since the days of Marcus Aurelius and the Antonine Plague, struck the Roman Empire. Historians call this the Plague of Cyprian. It was named, as we saw last time, for the bishop Cyprian of Carthage. He watched it unfold and wrote about it, including even some of the symptoms of the disease, which, although they haven't led to a diagnosis, confirm that this plague was severe, deadly, and likely a true pandemic that afflicted many parts of the Roman Empire. Cyprian claimed that this disease was one of many signs of impending divine judgment. It wasn't just that the plague had acted alone. The grain supply to Rome was failing. Silver and gold mines had dried up. The empire's coffers were emptying, and its people were starving. And if you listen to the episode on the collapse of the Roman monetary system, you know that the loss of silver and gold had very real economic effects. The silver coinage was down to about 5% silver and 95% base metal. It was silver coinage in name only. And in what has been a familiar refrain in the last few episodes of the podcast, I'm afraid I have to say it again, things just got worse. In AD 252, Sapor, king of the Sassanid Persians, invaded the Eastern Roman Empire. Rome's long-standing enemy to the east had been a sleeping giant, and finally, under the Sassanids, it had woken up. Sapor stormed Antioch, the eastern jewel of Roman Syria, breaching the walls, looting the city, and taking back territory that the rulers of Persia had not possessed for centuries. Trajan Decius, however, was occupied in the west, where he and his son would both die, fighting Gothic invaders. A series of several emperors and usurpers would follow in 252 and 253, and out of that maelstrom arose a man named Valerian, a senator and general who had control of several legions, which he used not to fight any more foreign wars, but to march on Rome in order to threaten the Senate into supporting his claim to power. Why anyone wanted to try to control the Roman Empire at this point, I'm not entirely sure. It was quite a mess. but Valerian decided to give it a go starting in 253. After many non-senatorial emperors, the Senate were thrilled to have one of their own back on the imperial throne. Even better, Valerian brought with him his son Gallienus, who was old enough to serve as co-emperor. And the bond of trust between father and son allowed Gallienus to stay in the west so that Valerian could march east and confront the growing menace of Sapor and the Sassanids. Valerian's war against the Sassanids would last for several years, and through a tremendous effort, he was able to claw back control of Antioch by the year 258 and drive Sapor's forces back across the Euphrates River. While Valerian was over in Persia, the persecution of Christian ramped up. You might remember from the last episode that Trajan Decius had ordered every single inhabitant of the Roman Empire to sacrifice to the gods. Christians, of course, would not participate in those rituals and were therefore branded as enemies of the Roman Empire. Systematic persecution at this point began in earnest, and Valerian was especially enthusiastic in going after Christians. It makes sense. He was fighting a war against Persia, and he wanted to make sure that the Roman gods were on his side. In one of Cyprian's letters, we have details of the kinds of measures ordered by Valerian while he was over in the east fighting Sapor of Persia. This is what Cyprian says, quote, "Bishops and presbyters and deacons should immediately be punished. Senators and men of importance and Roman knights should lose their dignity. Moreover, they should be deprived of their property. And if, when their means were taken away, they should persist in being Christians, then they will also lose their heads. Matrons should be deprived of their property and sent into banishment. Any Christians found in Caesar's household, whether they had confessed before or confess now, will have their property confiscated and will be sent in chains by assignment into Caesar's estates. Moreover, the prefects in the city are daily urging on this persecution, so that if any are presented to them, they are martyred, and their property is claimed by the treasury." This is Cyprian's 80th epistle. I think we see in this epistle not only a climate of intense and systematic persecution, we also understand a little bit more of Valerian's motivations. In addition to securing the support of the gods, the Roman Empire is obviously bankrupt. The persecutions seem to have targeted either elite Romans in the Senate or at least wealthy Romans. And it had been the case for hundreds of years that those who were made enemies of the state also forfeited the rights to their property, their land, their savings, their slaves, everything. And all of that got turned over to the state. And so Valerian was also using the fear of Christianity to loot his own subjects. The Christians who were persecuted under Valerian, however, got some justice. In AD 260, we're not sure exactly how, but Valerian was captured by Sapor. And to this day, in Iran, carved triumphantly into a cliff face, stands an image of Valerian, kneeling in submission to Sapor, who sits atop a horse. Valerian would never return to the Roman Empire. We don't know exactly what happened to him, but the rumors are not very flattering. Tales survive of Valerian having to act as a kind of living footstool, forced to crouch so that the Persian king could mount his horse. Christian writers would later claim that Sapor poured molten gold down Valerian's throat, flayed him, and stuffed his skin as a trophy. And although we can't know the truth of these tales, the reality was the Roman emperor, Rome's guardian, had been captured, and he died a humiliating death in the court of his enemy. Valerian's legions scattered, and his empire was fraying. With Valerian's fall in 260, Gallienus, now sole ruler, had to try to hold on to both east and west. But the threats to Rome, both internal and external, were simply too great. First in the west, Postumus, a provincial governor along the Rhine, a grizzled veteran trusted by his troops, was proclaimed emperor by his own soldiers. Postumus took numerous Roman cities in the province of Gaul. He executed prominent men loyal to Gallienus, and then you would assume that he might march on Rome like so many emperors and would-be emperors of the past, but instead, he decided to be content with the western provinces in Gaul, Spain, and Britain, setting up a new capital in the city of Cologne. Later, it would move to Trier. Postumus took the pragmatic step of building his own empire, one that was regionalized and therefore manageable. He minted his own coins, founded a new senate, instituted his own Praetorian Guard, and allowed men to serve as consuls, just like they had done in Rome. Postumus's coins, by the way, are some of the most beautiful coins minted in the 3rd century. One of the things that makes them especially rare is the choice to show the emperor not facing to the right or left in side profile, as is the case on virtually all Roman coins, but to face forward. However, despite the beautiful iconography of Postumus's coinage, he did not improve their quality, and his coins, like the coins of other Roman emperors and usurpers, remained heavily debased. He would go on to rule for several years, successfully fighting against Gallienus and preserving his control of the Western Roman Empire. Gallienus would be assassinated in 268. One of Gallienus's former armies decided to back a new usurper. Postumus and that man fought for control over the West, with Postumus actually winning the battle. It was fought near the modern city of Mainz, which at that time was a prosperous Roman city. Postumus's soldiers wanted to sack the city, but the Western emperor refused, wanting to show the citizens an act of mercy and goodwill. The soldiers decided that they were going to pillage and loot anyway, and also they might as well kill Postumus, who had denied their request. And so Postumus's 9-year reign as the head of his own separatist empire came to an end. The Gallic Empire would continue to limp on after Postumus, but it very slowly lost territory in Spain and Germania and was in a weakened state when a new emperor in Rome decided to try to reunite the empire. Well, at the same time that Postumus was leading in the West from 260 to 269, the Eastern Empire also saw a separatist movement. Here, a man named Odenathus, a man who held sweeping power over the East under Valerian, a kind of super governor of numerous provinces, began minting coins, which had Gallienus, Valerian's son, on the one side, suggesting that he was still loyal to the established emperors, but which also showed his head on the other side. Moreover, Odenathus took a title that left no ambiguity as to his position in the East, King of Palmyra. Palmyra was a Roman caravan city on the eastern edge of the empire, a wealthy and prosperous jewel that was desperately desired by the Sasanian Persians. And Odenathus was probably taking power to defend his city, its trade routes, and its lucrative position between the Roman and Sasanian empires. Palmyra was easily wealthy enough to support a large army that Odenathus controlled. And after declaring himself king, he was able to defeat the Persians, retake the province of Syria, and set up a quasi-separatist state in the east. The relationship between Odenathus and the emperors of Rome was a strange one. There is some evidence that he was formally acknowledged as leader, that is, dux. I don't know the extent to which his title of king was acknowledged by Roman emperors, but I think the Romans ultimately saw him as something more than a governor, but less than an emperor, something like a client king. And the leaders of this Palmyrene Empire would continue to acknowledge Roman emperors on their coinage up through the AD 270s. In 267, after a reign of 7 years, Odenathus was assassinated at a banquet, and his widow, Zenobia, leapt into power. Now, nominally, her 10-year-old son, Vabilathus, was in charge of the Palmyrene state, In reality, she was in charge, even calling herself Queen of the Palmyrene Empire, an empire that now encapsulated the former Roman provinces in Egypt, Syria, Palestine, and parts of Asia Minor. She and her son both show up on the coins from 270 onward. And if there is any moment at which we can say that the Palmyrene Empire had fully broken away from Rome, this moment was probably it. So now in 270, the Roman Empire had become a ghost of its former self. The Gallic Empire ruled in the west, Palmyra in the east, and Italy, Africa, and the Balkans were being ruled by a revolving door of emperors and usurpers. But one of the soldiers in the Balkans, a regular legionary, not a senator, not even a general, rose up through the ranks, and in 270 won the hearts of the soldiers along the Danube. This soldier, a man named Aurelian, would take on both the Gallic and the Palmyrene empires in a Herculean effort to restore the unity of the Roman Empire. Would he succeed? We'll find out on the next episode of the Pax Romana podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Pax Romana podcast. For more information, including a list of primary sources and further reading, check the show notes. Music by Red Productions and Exocor. Follow Dr. Colin Elliott on X at ProfCPE or email colin@paxromanapodcast.com. Listen to more episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just about anywhere podcasts are available. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Pax Romana podcast.